You ever just pour your entire soul into something? Like every late night, every skipped meal, every ounce of creative energy just flows into this one thing, this one project, because you genuinely believe in it? That was me just a couple of years ago and my VR prototype. My baby, my absolute everything. I'm, by the way, and I was about 29 back then. Fresh out of a grad program, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to change the world, I landed a job at this small VR startup, and I mean small. We were operating out of a cramped office space that smelled vaguely of stale coffee and ambition. But oh, the ambition was real. We were a ragtag group of dreamers, all convinced we were on the cusp of something revolutionary. We talked about disrupting industries, about genuine innovation, about making a real difference. And I truly bought into it, hook, line, and sinker. My personal motivation wasn't just a paycheck. Although rent in the city is no joke, let me tell you. It was about something bigger. I truly believed in the power of immersive experiences. Not just for gaming, although that's cool too, but for connecting people, for education, for even, dare I say, healing. I envisioned VR being used to train surgeons in remote areas, or to help people overcome phobias in a safe, controlled environment, or even to virtually explore historical sites for educational purposes. I wanted to leave a mark, to build something meaningful that genuinely improved lives. It was this almost naive idealism that fueled me, pushed me past exhaustion, and made me blind to a lot of the red flags waving right in front of my face. And that, I guess, is why I tolerated so much for so long. I believed in the vision, and I believed that eventually, my contributions would be recognized. I truly did. My specific project, the one that became my obsession, was this VR prototype designed for high-fidelity interactive training simulations. Think less about shooting zombies and more about, say, practicing complex surgical procedures with haptic feedback or navigating dangerous industrial environments to simulate emergency protocols. It was a beast of a project, requiring intricate code, precise sensor calibration, and a user interface that had to be intuitive even under pressure. It was innovative, sleek, and critically, it was stable. It just worked. I'd spent countless late nights, weekends, and holidays meticulously crafting every line of code, every pixel of the interface. I lived and breathed that project. My apartment literally became an extension of the office, filled with VR headsets, circuit boards, and empty coffee cups. Friends would call, asking if I was ever coming out, and I'd just sigh and say, almost there, almost there. The initial internal demos were met with, well, awe, genuine awe. People were blown away. The team members who saw it firsthand were buzzing. "This is incredible," they'd say, their voices filled with genuine excitement. The CEO, Mark, actually let's call him Mark, even though his full name is a swear word in my vocabulary now anyway, Mark was practically drooling. He saw the dollar signs clear as day. He wasn't interested in the nuances of the tech or the potential for social good. He saw market penetration, investor interest, and a fat bonus for himself. And for a brief, glorious moment, I felt a flicker of hope. That all my sacrifice, all my endless hours, all my passion was finally paying off. I even imagined my name on some press release, a little footnote about Miller, our lead engineer. Foolish, I know. Oh, how naive I was. I actually thought my hard work spoke for itself. That hope, yeah, it was quickly snuffed out. Mark, our chief product officer, swooped in like a vulture to a fresh kill. Literally, he took all the credit for my R&D, every single ounce. He presented it as his own brainchild, his vision, his genius. Can you believe that? He stood up there in front of the entire company, beaming, taking bows, while I just sat in the third row, my stomach in knots, watching my life's work being stolen right before my eyes. I felt a wave of nausea. My hands were clammy, my heart pounding, not with excitement, but with a cold dread. I really was. I mean, I knew corporate politics existed, but I genuinely thought talent and hard work spoke for themselves. Silly me. After his grand presentation, I tried to approach him. Gently, my voice was a little shaky, but I tried to keep it steady. "Hey Mark," I started, "that was a great presentation. Just wanted to clarify a few things about the development process since I led that part and have some detailed insights." He cut me off with a dismissive wave and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His gaze slid right past me. "Darling," he said, and the darling just dripped with condescension like I was some annoying little sister. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about it. We'll make sure you get your recognition in due time. Big things are happening, big things." Vague promises of future opportunities and a pat on the shoulder that felt more like a shoo-away gesture. It was infuriating. I just stood there speechless as he turned his back and walked away, already schmoozing with someone else. Then came the real kick in the gut. The very next week I was reassigned. Not promoted, not given a new exciting project, reassigned to a support role. Support, can you imagine? After pouring years into R&D, after designing and building the most advanced prototype the company had ever seen, I was told my talents were better suited for troubleshooting customer queries. "It's a temporary measure," my manager, a decent guy who looked genuinely uncomfortable delivering the news, mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "Just until the next big R&D cycle ramps up. We need your sharp mind on the front lines, gathering user feedback." As if I was born yesterday, I just nodded numb, feeling like a heavy weight had just settled in my chest, my dreams crushed under the weight of corporate greed. The constant, subtle jabs started almost immediately. It wasn't just the demotion, it was the atmosphere. The way my colleagues, some of whom I considered friends, started looking at me like I was a problem, not a contributor, like I was a demotion waiting to happen. The whispers in the hallway would stop abruptly when I approached. My ideas, even when I offered them in a support meeting, were met with polite nods, then completely ignored. Each condescending remark, each project I was passed over for, each time Mark would stride past my desk in the support bullpen without so much as a glance was a fresh wound. I was invisible, or worse, I was a failure in their eyes. It felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying not to draw attention, just trying to survive each day. The internal tension was building, a slow burn of resentment that I tried desperately to suppress for the sake of my dream job. But deep down, something was hardening, a quiet resolve. I remember one particularly humiliating incident. We had a new intern start, a bright-eyed kid just like I used to be. Mark was giving him a tour of the office, pointing out various departments. When they got to the support area where I was buried under a pile of tickets, my headset clamped to my ear. Mark paused, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "And this," he announced, loud enough for me to hear, and I swear he put extra emphasis on the word "this," "is where we handle user complaints." It's a vital function, of course, for quality control, our customer-facing team always on the intern looked at me with pity in his eyes, a look that said, "Oh, so this is where the bright ones end up." I just sat there like, really? Did that just happen? My face burned, but I forced myself to stare at my screen, pretending to be absorbed in a particularly complex troubleshooting issue. But inside, something snapped. That quiet resolve started to turn into something sharper, colder. But here's the thing about me, I'm not a quitter, and I wasn't just going to roll over and let them walk all over me, let alone steal my creation. While they were busy toasting their success with my prototype, while Mark was busy taking all the credit and living the high life, I was quietly laying the groundwork. I was still getting paid after all, and I still had access. I knew the system inside and out. I'd built it, remember, every line of code, every function, every potential vulnerability. And when I was originally designing the firmware months ago, I'd had a moment of foresight, a flash of what if, that frankly seemed a bit paranoid at the time. I'd built in a small, almost undetectable fail-safe, a one-time license activation window embedded deep within the firmware. It was just a tiny piece of code, designed more as a future-proofing measure for potential licensing models than as an act of defiance, but now it was my ace in the hole. It required a specific, unique developer password to activate the initial license, and only I had that password. It was a digital key, and I was the only one with a copy. While I was stuck answering phone calls about frozen screens and glitching textures, I was also meticulously documenting everything. Every single email from Mark claiming credit, every meeting minute where my contributions were minimized, every casual conversation where he subtly, or not so subtly, undermined me or claimed my work as his own. I had screenshots, timestamp notes, even audio recordings of a couple of particularly egregious conversations that I'd started recording on my phone just on a whim, never thinking I'd actually need them. But there they were, damning evidence. I started consulting quietly with a lawyer friend just to understand my options. Not an official legal battle yet, just information gathering. I wanted to know exactly what my rights were, what I could prove, and what kind of leverage I might have. It wasn't about revenge in an emotional sense, it was about justice. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, yes, but also about holding someone accountable for their blatant theft and deception. I wasn't looking for a screaming match, I was preparing for a strategic strike. Cold, professional, calculated. My allies, if you can call them that, were few and far between but crucial. There was Sarah, a junior engineer who had seen me work tirelessly on the project and knew the truth, but she was too afraid to speak up directly. She'd give me sympathetic glances and the occasional encouraging nod. But more importantly, she'd sometimes accidentally leave open a document on her computer that I needed or forget to log out of a shared drive. Small things, but they added up. Then there was Ben, a senior developer in another department. He was a quiet guy, notoriously apolitical, but he respected my work. He didn't speak out either, but he had a way of leaving me relevant technical documents or internal memos that might be useful. He was my silent source, my internal whisper network. I'd ask seemingly innocent questions about project timelines or client contracts, and he'd point me in the right direction without ever saying too much. He knew what was happening, and he didn't like it. His quiet support fueled me. It was enough. It was more than enough. I also kept meticulously up to date on Mark's sales efforts. From my support role, I still had access to internal sales reports and shipping manifests. I knew he was close to closing a huge deal with a major enterprise client, a multi-million-dollar contract for hundreds of units of my VR system. I even had access to the shipping manifests, still being in support and all, which sometimes included logistics information. I saw the date the first major batch was scheduled to ship, and I started to count down. Every day felt like an eternity. I'd rehearse what I would say, how I would present the evidence. I wanted to be ready, not emotional, not angry, just precise. The day the first major batch of their VR units shipped to that key client, a massive industrial conglomerate, I felt a strange calm, an eerie sense of peace. My heart wasn't pounding, it was steady. I knew what was coming. I had visualized this moment 1,000 times. I just went about my day answering support calls, pretending nothing was amiss. But inside, I was ready for the fireworks. And sure enough, a few days later, my phone started buzzing, not with calls from the support line about forgotten passwords or installation issues. No, these were calls from numbers I didn't recognize, from frantic-sounding executives. The first one was from the client's IT director. He was beyond livid. "Ms. Miller," he barked, his voice practically shaking through the phone, "we have a serious problem with your VR units. None of them are activating, they're all bricked." I feigned surprise, my voice an innocent whisper. "Oh, what seems to be the issue, sir?" He explained that every single unit they tried to activate presented them with the same prompt: "Please enter the original developer's password to activate your license." They couldn't bypass it, they couldn't activate the units. $3 million worth of hardware sitting there useless, just a pile of very expensive plastic and circuits. He was threatening to sue for breach of contract, demanding immediate resolution. The chaos that ensued in the company was glorious in the coldest, most satisfying way possible. The C-suite was in an absolute frenzy. Mark was running around like a headless chicken, screaming into his phone, demanding answers from the engineering team. He'd barked at a few of the junior engineers he'd tasked with reverse engineering my work, a few guys who barely understood the core architecture, let alone the deeper firmware. They were stumped. They couldn't figure out why the activation prompt was there, let alone how to bypass it. They were pulling all-nighters, sweating and failing. Finally, the CEO, his face red and sputtering, called me into his office. Mark was already there, packing nervously, avoiding my gaze, his usually slick-back hair a mess. The CEO didn't even bother with pleasantries, he just pointed to the chair opposite his desk. He began, his voice strained. "We have a critical issue with the VR units shipped to client name. They're all asking for some kind of developer password. Do you know anything about this?" He didn't sound accusatory, just desperate. I took a deep breath, composed myself. My voice was calm, professional, almost detached. "Yes, sir, I do. When I was developing the core firmware for the prototype, I included a one-time license activation window. It was a standard security measure designed for future licensing and intellectual property protection. It requires a unique developer password for initial activation." Mark scoffed, he actually scoffed. "That's ridiculous, you never mentioned anything about that. It's a bug, a sabotage, you're trying to sabotage us." His voice was high-pitched, desperate. I turned to him, a cool, unblinking stare. My gaze felt like ice. "Actually, Mark," I said, "I included it in the initial design documentation which you yourself signed off on. You remember that small clause under Firmware Security Protocols, page 37, section 421? I specifically highlighted it in a meeting on October 12th of last year, a meeting you chaired where I outlined all the security features." He blanched. His face went from red to ashen. He clearly didn't remember, or more accurately, he never bothered to read it. He just initialed and moved on. Then I opened my laptop. "Furthermore," I continued, my voice steady, "I have here all my original design schematics, detailed code comments, and project logs, all time-stamped and verifiable by an independent auditor. They clearly show my complete and sole ownership of the intellectual property for this prototype. I also have documented proof of Mark's consistent misrepresentation of my work as his own, his subsequent reassignment of me to a non-R&D role, and his public claims of sole credit for this technology." I presented the CEO with a carefully organized folder brimming with evidence, emails with read receipts, internal memos I'd downloaded, even that audio recording where Mark dismissed my contributions. I clicked play on a short clip from that recording, just enough for them to hear Mark's condescending tone and his dismissive remark about my pretty little head. The silence in that room was deafening. The CEO's jaw tightened. He looked at Mark, then back at me, then at the folder, then at Mark again. There were no hysterics from me, just a quiet, professional demeanor. I was simply presenting the facts, backed by my meticulously gathered documentation and a quiet explanation of the firmware's function. Mark was fired on the spot, right there. No fanfare, no goodbyes, no severance, I heard through the grapevine, just gone. His desk was cleared out by security within the hour. It was surreal. One minute he was swaggering around, the next he was escorted out, his face a picture of utter defeat. The company, scrambling to save face with the client and prevent a total meltdown, offered me a deal. They acknowledged my full and undeniable ownership of the IP, promoted me to lead a brand new R&D division, and offered me 5% of all future sales of the VR system. 5%? For a system projected to bring in tens of millions annually, it was more than I ever expected. And yes, I gave them the password once, after the contracts were signed, sealed, and delivered. It wasn't just about the money, though that certainly changed my life in incredible ways. I finally paid off my student loans, bought a small place of my own, and even started an investment portfolio. But beyond the financial security, it was the moral satisfaction, the quiet triumph of knowing that integrity eventually wins. It's the feeling of reclaiming what was rightfully mine, of proving that you can't just walk all over people and steal their dreams. It felt like a weight had been lifted, a burden I hadn't even fully realized I was carrying. A year later, the company has completely rebranded, with a renewed focus on ethical development and transparency. Funny how a $3 million snafu can change a corporate culture, right? We've brought in new leadership, implemented stricter IP protection policies, and there's a tangible shift in atmosphere. My new R&D division is thriving. I'm building a team of passionate, talented individuals who are valued for their contributions, where ideas are celebrated and credit is given where credit is due. We're already working on the next generation of VR tech, pushing boundaries and doing it the right way. We're actually collaborating with universities on educational applications, which feels incredible. Sometimes you just have to bet on yourself, even when everyone else is trying to count you out, even when they try to make you invisible. That quiet fire inside, that belief in your own worth and your own work, that's your power. And can you believe it? The sweet taste of justice is even better in virtual reality.